Okay, perfect. Hey, it's Troy Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Welcome to another Retirement Readiness Thursday. Today, I have a treat for you. Today, we have a case study. We have Harold. Harold is 65. He's widowed. He retired. He was a retired postal service, so he has a pension. So that puts him in a rare air where he has a pension already set up. And another thing that's unique about Harold is he does not want to invest in the stock market. Harold says, I don't want to touch stocks. I don't like the volatility. It keeps me up at night. It stresses me out. I would like to grow my money with, like CDs and bonds and relatively safe investments. And so we said, hey, am I going to be able to retire without the risk of running out of money? So we had the conversation, we went through everything, and I'm going to share that with you today. And because there's always going to be situations where you're just like, I would just like to know that I can build my wealth outside of the stock market, which is totally a possibility. But then normally those tend to be people that have a business or real estate. But Harold is like, no, I just want to do it with a pension. And then I'd consider getting an annuity. And then I want to have the CDs. And he's like, that's what I'm looking for in my plan. And so what I'll do is I'll go through Harold's plan for you. And I'm going to show you. So you can see right on the top, Harold has a 93% probability of success. And there's a couple things that we normally will touch on first, just to show you how tight really the opportunity is. So for Harold, we put his life expectancy at 80. We're like, because normally we like to build the plans at 90 because it already builds in a level of certainty just in the risk of running out of money. Because if there is a couple, I mean, his wife had already passed, so it's not the same data, but there is numbers that says if there is a couple, both of them are 65, that the likelihood of one of them making it to 90 it's like 50%, right? Like it's a pretty high number. And so there is a reason to plan for 90, even though we know the average person, the average male, I think, is 73 in the US. The average female is 77 in the US. And so his wife had already passed, so we'll go through some of that. So with his 93% probability of success, we had to move him up to 80 so that we just had a very tight time as far as just the way the money worked. And I will go through sort of some of the thoughts on that. And then we had some of the accounts. Let me take you through it as well. His house was paid off, so that's where that $180,000 is. He does have $250,000. I believe it was sitting in a traditional IRA, and then it was pretty conservatively invested in the sense that it was just like CDs and bonds and things like that. And then he had $8,000 in his bank account. Right, so that's the way his plan is. So that gives you a net worth of $510,000. Car is already paid off, so he was good on that. And then let's go through some of the data. So we mentioned 80,000 to savings, 250. That was in his traditional IRA. The property is 180, and he had no other bills. He was debt-free. So if you're debt-free, if you're planning on living on a pension, normally the way that we design like pensions and annuities is the idea is, can my pension and Social Security cover all of my needs, right? Like that's basically the idea. If I can cover my needs with my pension and my Social Security, or I can cover my needs with my annuity and my Social Security, then we're only working on the ones with whatever the other investments are. And so that would be the other 250,000. And for his pension, let me see if I can go to it. So his pension was at 28,000. He's already has Social Security, and that's already started, and that's at 2,300. And so that covers all of his needs, which is normally a really good sign that we're starting off good. Now, with his pension, it's worth knowing that he does not have cost of living adjustments in his pension. So he did not have COLA, but he does have the cost of living adjustments in Social Security. So he's in a good spot with that. And then we will move on as far as his goals. For his retirement, he's like, I want to retire at 65. That's what he is. So he's retired. His expenses were $3,800, which we're able to cover with his pension and his annuity, or his pension and the Social Security. His health expenses, we know that we just took the national average for that. He wasn't sure what they would end up being. He did want to see if it was possible to leave $100,000 for his kids as far as a legacy. Like he's like, I would just like to have that left over. And then it is what it is. I'll show you the way that the cash flows work to see if it's going to work out that way. But like most things, it depends on what we're doing in retirement, how long we live, and things like that. When we're focusing on CDs and bonds and things like that, we're not in the stock market. We're basically, the goal is to be as close to inflation as we possibly can. Because if we can keep up with inflation, basically, if you start off with your retirement where you already hit the goal, then if we're able to keep up with inflation, you get to keep the retirement that you achieved. So that's the idea. If you're someone that maybe we're close, but But it would be nice if we could have some extra cushion on some of those years later in retirement where we do have a return that's maybe 6%, but we only spent 3%. We're able to start building a little bit of a cushion. A lot of people like that as well, but it's okay that Harold didn't want to use the stocks, and we're going to show you how that works. Harold did say he wanted to do a home improvement project. He knew he needed a new roof, and that was going to be 3 years into retirement. So he said like 68 for that. We know that he did talk about taking vacations where he was traveling, and then normally we normally set that sort of around like 75. Some people will say, look, Dre, I promise you, I'm going to my cabin or whatever every single year. But normally the expense of that trip isn't as high. So for him, he was like, yeah, I'll probably travel a little bit. I was going to do stuff with my wife, but it's not going to work out that way. And so he's like, let's just keep something in there, right? Like, I'm like, hey, let's just keep something in there because you don't want to be bored in retirement. And so that's what this is. This is like, hey, look, I'm going to call them up and be like, are we traveling? Have we traveled this year yet? Because it's in the plan and you can do it. And then we just keep up with general inflation for that. He recognized that he'll need a new vehicle. In 2017, it was free and clear, so which is great. Then we said, let's just at least let's say in 5 years we'll need a new vehicle, right? I know you're going to drive it till the wheels fall off. I respect that. I'm the same way. But let's just say that the wheels fall off by 2030. And so that's what this thought is. So we'll be able to just purchase the vehicle outright. Cars, they're a lot of time you can get a 0% on a car. You can get a 1 to 2% on a car. Or sometimes if we're focusing on cash flow, that we might say, well, let's not spend the $35,000 up front. Let's just get the loan and then pay the loan off. It'll be almost the same as cash, but it's moving us later where we get to keep the 35,000. But when you have a relatively conservative investment, it's more important to focus on keeping your expenses down. Where the goal is, as we mentioned, is to make sure that your Social Security and your pension cover all of your needs, and then we can have the other amounts to try to cover the wants. And if it's even possible, Social Security can cover some of the wants as well. But that was why we decided let's just buy the vehicle outright in 5 years, because we want to make sure that we are not having where some of your other bills aren't covered by your Social Security and pension, or your annuity and things like that. So those were the decisions that we made on that, as far as making sure we're in a good spot there. As far as now, naturally, you guys know I'm normally big on talking about all of the fancy stuff with the Roth conversions and different things like that. We didn't really have to do any of that. Right, the plan kind of is what it is. We wanted to have 100,000 left over. We're expected to have somewhere around there, 80 to 100,000. So we're close to what the legacy goal is. And then we're just going to kind of have to wait and see how the retirement goes. We're able to get roughly a relatively safe conservative strategy in place. So normally what I'll do is you guys will see me on the spending. I will normally adjust the spending to the retirement spending smile, because that's more accurate, but that ends up being a little bit less conservative. If I say you're going to spend the exact same amount every single year for the rest of your life and it's going to increase by inflation, that is one of the most conservative retirement spending options I can do. So I wasn't able to put in like the long-term care and the other things, but I was like, well, at least let me build the plan with the assumption that you're spending a lot of money as far as covering inflation. But you can see that if I change it to the spending smile, which is going to be what most of us end up doing, which is I spend a lot early on, I spend less in the middle, and I spend a lot later at the end because of healthcare expenses, that it would be at 100%, it'd be closer to $200,000 left over because he'd be spending less, whereas Social Security and his pension would cover everything. But I do like to just, like I said, I do like to just keep something in there where we're still at least covering some of the risk in some way. So you can see that this plan ends up working. Now, what I'll do is I will show you, let me share it with you. Okay. So when you're someone who says, I don't like the stock market, right? Like, I like to be relatively conservative. How does that look as far as my spending? And the way that we would normally think about this is I would still be thinking about my 3-bucket strategy. Right. So your bucket number 1 is going to be your safe and your conservative investments. Bucket number 2 is normally going to be your moderate. And so the way that this normally works, let me see if I can slide up perfect. So the way that this normally works, this is going to be your cash. And this is going to be more like your income. So when we're talking about being conservatively invested, we're basically not going to have anything in bucket number 3. So our bucket number 3 is normally our growth, and then that's going to be our aggressive bucket. So if we're talking about not having anything that is aggressively allocated, then we're basically skipping out on bucket number three. So that's the 10 plus years. And that's normally going to be things like your business, your stocks, and your real estate. When we're focusing on the income producing buckets, we're going to have a decent amount of our allocation. So normally when you're conservative, you're probably going to have, I would probably say it's going to be maybe like 10% here and maybe like 90% here. It can adjust a little bit where maybe you can go up to 25, 75, but when you're really thinking about this, remember this bucket is probably going to be generating somewhere between 1 to 2%. And then this bucket is going to be generating somewhere probably around 2 to 4%. So let me erase that. And so if this bucket is then producing somewhere around 2 to 4%, our goal is to keep up with inflation so you can maintain your lifestyle, right? Because that's the idea is because of inflation, I am normally going to find myself having, I believe it's like the rule of 72. It basically means every 20 years, it doubles. The cost of what your lifestyle is doubles. So for example, if you lived off of $50,000 a year right now, in 20 years in 2045, you would need $100,000 a year to live the exact same lifestyle. And we can sort of see that when you look around where you're looking at the average price of a house today versus the average price of a house 10 years ago, where you're looking at the price of a car, or the monthly payment of a car today, and you compare it to the monthly payment of a car 20 years ago, you can see that it wasn't crazy for someone to have a $250 a month car payment 20 years ago. It wasn't crazy for someone to have a $350 a month car payment 20 years ago. That's the rare numbers today. You're probably not going to find many people with $250 a month. Most car payments and you've seen them, most of them are going to be well over $500. I've seen some at $700, $800, $900. I've seen those. I've seen banks to try to finagle the numbers where we normally would back in the day, maybe have 3 years would be a reasonable amount of time to pay my car off. And then when I was growing up, 5 years was a reasonable amount of time to pay a car off. And I've seen 6 and 7 year terms now because the cost is going up and the amount of the monthly payment is going up. So they adjust the instrument to get the approvals. And so you're seeing what it looks like where the cost of things is going up and we're just trying to buy a car, where the cost of the house is going up and we're just trying to put a roof over our head. Because of that, we normally want to make sure we're just keeping up with inflation so we don't have that sticker shock where I have my car, I've been driving around for 10 years, and then when I go get a new car, I'm like, whoa, what happened? When did that become the price of just an ordinary car? And so that's why we normally want to keep up with that. Because of that, we don't want to be too heavily weighted in the safe bucket if we're going to go ahead and be relatively conservative, because we don't have anything in the growth to offset it. So we'll still high level when you're talking about your pension. Like normally you want to have 1 to 3 years of living expenses in this bucket. And that's normally going to be your cash. That's going to be your money market accounts. And then that could be like your CDs. So those are normally going to be the things that we're going to have in the cash bucket. But because some of them are high enough to keep up with inflation. If you find them to keep up with inflation, that's fine. Go more in that bucket. But if you're going to be around that 2%, as it is sometimes as the market flows, then we would then say, all right, so the rest of it I'm going to focus on over here. And so then that will be your bonds. And so you'll be thinking about getting like a bond ladder or something like that. If you got TIPS, and that is Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. That's what TIP stands for. And it's just as it sounds, these are Treasury bills, government debt, right? A bond is government debt. So you get the government debt, but it's tied to inflation. So if inflation is 10%, I'm getting a payment of income for 20% increase. If inflation is 3%, then I'm going to get a 3% payment increase. That it's going to match inflation. And so we feel good about maintaining a lifestyle. So it's going to be like your bonds, it's going to be your TIPS. And then this is where you would consider my income bucket. So that would be like my pension. And then because theirs doesn't actually go up with inflation, they don't have the COLA, I would probably actually consider that a bucket 1 in my safe. If you do have a pension that has a COLA, I would probably consider that in my moderate because it's going to keep up with inflation. And that's the idea of the moderate bucket. And then if you had an annuity, Which oftentimes, if you are someone that feels like you want to have a conservative investment strategy where you don't want to use stocks and the market and things like that, then if we have the money that's set aside, sometimes the return on an annuity where it just gives you that income because we're focusing on the cash flow. And so we have our needs covered. Our needs can be covered in our pension and our Social Security. And then we could just get the annuity if we would like, and then that covers all your wants. So that way you don't even have to think about it. You have that choice. Now, of course, you could also invest in any of these other things, and you're going to get the return that's most likely going to outpace the pension. And the only reason that we didn't do the annuity for this particular one is because he said one of his goals was to leave $100,000, for his kids. So if you want to leave the money, if you're having a legacy play, more times than not, then you're not going to be able to put the money in an annuity or even like a reverse mortgage. And sometimes like thinking through it, that's why I'm kind of studying. Because when you're thinking about an annuity, you're going to give the bank the money. It locks in a certain amount of money like that day. And then they are going to extrapolate how much they're going to pay you the rest of your life based on how long you're going to live and things like that. But then when it's done, it's done. So if you live 1 year, it's done. They keep the money, or they may at best, they give you the amount that you paid in monthly premiums to someone else, but that's not a slam dunk. But if you get all of the premiums back in payments and then you're done, then that's it. And so if you're saying, hey, Dre, I would like a legacy option, then that normally means we need to keep control of the money. And then we would invest in it, things like that. And so the way that this would work, the way you would allocate this is we'll do $100,000 to make it easy for me, right? I know we had more than that, but we'll just do $100,000 to keep it easy for me. So the way you would normally do it is you would say, all right, I'm going to take my $100,000. I'm going to put 90K in this bucket. I'm going to put 10K in this bucket. And then if you already have the pension that's considered over here, so your pension is 28K. So then we would basically, I think it was thinking like a percent there. So because you already have your pension at 28K, we would basically consider that the cash in the money market, everything else, and then we would be investing everything else. So all the money that's in the annuity would stay here, and it would be in like bonds and treasury investment tips. And then we would consider, even if it was a small portion of an annuity, but probably not, like we would be okay. And we can talk about things like bond ladders and different things. And all we're really saying is that as the market adjusts, so let me show you real quick. All we're basically saying is that the market normally goes through seasons. Just like we have our normal seasons, where we have spring, and then we have summer, and then we have fall, and then we have winter. We always have the same 4 seasons. Nothing changes on that. When you talk about economics, we have the same 4 seasons. We have expansion, which you may have heard just described as growth. We normally have the peak, and that's where everything kind of stops. Like it's as high as it's going to get. And then we normally have the decline. And sometimes you may hear that called a contraction, or you may hear that called a recession. And then the 4th season is eventually we're going to hit the bottom, and that's called the trough. And then we're back to expansion. So those are the same 4 economic seasons, and there's no way to go through any other way. That at some point you're going to have a bunch of economic growth, but as you saw just like 2 years ago? Yeah, like 2 years ago, when you have a bunch of economic growth, what's happening? It means that we have low unemployment. I guess so. Actually, I need to change that a little bit. It means that we have low unemployment. So almost everybody has a job. And another way to think of that is that means I have to offer you a really nice option to get you to leave your job. We already recognize that everyone has a job. So if everyone has a job that wants a job, the only way I can get you to leave is I have to offer you a better salary, a better position, better benefits, where you can work from home or however that looks. I have to offer you something, right? And so that's what's happening in times of economic growth. Everybody's making money, low unemployment. I'm offering you more money. And then what happens? People start buying houses for like $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 over asking price, right? You remember that, right? People were just throwing money at houses. Did not matter. You were like, man, the house has like nothing on it. It was a piece of land with a trailer dragged on top of it, and they're like $500,000. You remember that? Well, at some point, we're running the risk of inflation, and that's what we were at. But then if it keeps going, you have hyperinflation, which screws us all over. So then the Fed comes in and raises the interest rate. So that rounds it off. That stops it. Interest rates are higher, people stop moving. People are like, I'm not going anywhere. That's what happened. And they hold those interest rates long enough for people to start losing their jobs, people to stop buying houses, all that happens same seasons, and we start having the decline. And then we're somewhere around here to here. And that's why everybody's trying to wait to see where the Fed's going to lower the interest rates again. Well, if you're building a bond ladder, the idea is I buy a bunch of bonds here. So let's say it's like 5 to 7%. That's crushing it, right? Like I'm doing great. As far as a safe return on debt, not in the stock market, I'm doing really good. So when the market is going and we're having this peak, I'm going to go ahead and get my 5, 6, 7% returns. I'm going to lock them in. I'm going to get 10-year bonds, 20-year bonds, 30-year bonds. I'm going to build my ladder. And then we recognize that we're going to be selling and living off of these. And then, yes, it is true that sometimes we're going to buy bonds that are going to be lower rates. We're not really keeping inflation. The idea is that my bond portfolio on average is still keeping up with inflation. I have some 7% from when we're at the high. I have some 2% when we're at the low, and hopefully they're averaging to keep up with inflation. That's the idea of a bond ladder. And so that's what you basically would do. You recognize that you're going to have the same seasons, and as soon as you start seeing us go to expansion and the rates are higher, you just do everything you can. Now, the benefit is when you're down here and the rates are at 2%, people are like, oh my gosh, you have a 7%? Where did you get that? And you're like, oh yeah, I got it back at the peak. And they're like, dude, I will pay you a premium for that because I'm only seeing 2% in the market. And then you'll be like, okay, I will sell some of my 7% at a premium. So now you're increasing the funds that you have for your retirement because everybody's looking. Everybody's like, what do I see in my safe investments? It's like 1, 2, 3%. And then you're out here at 5, 6, 7%. So people will pay you a premium. And that's the idea of the bond ladder. You build this bond ladder, and then you're able to sell some at a premium. You're able to keep them, get the interest payments. You're able to build some at a lower amount, and then hopefully you're averaging and maintaining it. But you're able to really work through that. And that's kind of how we would build that. Right. And so you do have those options. Now, that is something where you're just like, Dre, dude, that's too much. That's stressing me out. I don't want to deal with that. Then normally you would take a look at an annuity, and then you would just go ahead and take whatever portion, leaving the 100,000 that you want to leave as your legacy, and then you would get annuity for maybe 150,000. That would be the idea there. All right, let's see what we got. Retired 2019. How are you, my friend? Great topic. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I'm glad. I'm here for you. We're trying to do case studies on every situation that I've run into, just to give you some ideas so that you can kind of see through it and really feel your way through it. So I'm glad that you're appreciated and like that, my friend. Thank you very much. All right, so that will do it for us today. If you are interested, on every single Wednesday, we do Worry-Free Wednesday. We do it live. It's going to be as beautiful as this, except we go through the 5 hidden dangers to a wealthy retirement, and we go over 3 frameworks that I use with my clients to make sure you don't have to worry about them. So if that is something that you're interested in doing, you just go to I Want a Wealthy Retirement. You just click that. It will then take you to the sign up page. It has the timer because it's every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. And then you just sign up, and then it'll give you the access to be able to start building the information just in the same programs that I use. And then we'll send you to a page where you're able to sign up for the Zoom. It's limited to the first 100 because that's just how many fit in my Zoom room. But we do go over the 5 hidden dangers, everything from dealing with healthcare expenses to running out of money to how do I make sure I don't lose my money. All that stuff we cover in there. And it's definitely a benefit that people enjoy. All right. Anything else? Max, thanks, Mom. Thank you, Dre. Yeah, I'm here for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm thankful for the time that we have together. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your summer. And as always, stay safe and enjoy life.